Hello everyone, this is Princess here, and for today's video we're going to talk a bit about the first 6-man warrior quest, and we're going to talk about the new force and burst that will be featured, which is for Kam'lanaut, and then the returning burst, which will be for Pecil. So let's get started. Alright, so Kam'lanaut's force is called the X-Brigader, and this grants the skill Jin Blade. His force partner is going to be Cypher, and they will deal a 6-hit AoE Brave split HP attack dealt 3 times. This has a 150% Brave hit potency, and it deals more damage on enemies afflicted with the Cannot Act debuff, or just any sort of paralysis debuff for that matter. So for the force time, so it's 10% at the start, 10% when attacking an enemy with a Cannot Act debuff, this also includes launches, and then 10% when using an ice skill. So then for the burst weapon, we have the Celestial Caliber, which grants Transcendescent Blade. I have no idea how you pronounce that, but it's a 15-hit AoE Brave split HP attack with an 80% Brave potency. The burst effect is 6 turns, and it can inflict this unique debuff called Bondage from Antiquity to all enemies for 1 turn. So for the burst effect itself, Transcendescent Blade, whatever it is, it raises the party's HP damage and their Brave damage cap, and then at 2 out of 3 it will add a party Brave gain boost and a max Brave cap boost. And then as for the debuff, so Bondage from Antiquity, this prevents enemies from acting, it lowers their Brave damage resist, and then when it expires, so the wording on this is kind of weird, so when it expires, it will trigger this trap where after the enemy turn, that grants the player ally with the closest turn order to act immediately after. It's a little weird, I know, but it does make a lot more sense like when you have it yourself. Alright, so looking at Paladin Cecil's burst, so at 2 out of 3, the burst effect will extend to 6 turns, and it also improves. So for party members whose HP is greater than or equal to a max, it raises their Brave damage cap and their max Brave cap. So the first two bosses that you'll be fighting for Area 1 is, the first one is going to be the Raging Tortoise, and this one doesn't really have any sort of unique gimmicks other than just like coming out of its shell or just retreating into its shell, but it will resist a lot of elemental skills. So when it's out of its shell, it will resist all elements, and then when it's in its shell, it is weak to all elements. And keep in mind, when it goes inside of its shell, it gains a lot of brain, and then will use Ground Shaker Plus on its next turn. So to mitigate that, you want to hit it with an ice skill, and then it just changes to Ground Shaker, which really won't do a lot of damage unless you're running like damage mitigation. And then it also just reduces elemental Brave damage when it's in or out of its shell. So it's not too scary, but just keep in mind that be on the lookout for when it goes inside of its shell and then powers up to use Ground Shaker Plus on its next turn. So make sure you have a nice damage dealer when that happens, and a damage mitigator. So then we have the other boss. So this is a Karasleon. It's supposed to be like a Megalodoth enemy. It's like a reskin of the bosses we fought in Arc 3 Chapter 2. So there's not really anything scary about this one. It can raise its stats and like also shift phases. But for its attacks, it only just uses Thunderbolt. But keep in mind when when the Force Gauge is active, it will use Thunderbolt Plus, where it can recover from break, dispel all of your buffs, including framed ones, and it can hit you with this guaranteed magic attack. So they really want you to use paralysis for this. So for the Force Gauge itself, you can weaken the gauge when you're using a Force skill involving a melee Brave damage, and also when they have their when the gauge slowly goes up, it raises up their attack, and it also prevents them from being delayed. So when that happens, using characters like Selfie wouldn't really work. You could still use Quistis. Well, I think you can. I don't know. But you can. What I meant to say was you can also still delete their turns with like Zidane or a Metatelian. So then for their force time, so for the tortoise, well, both for the tortoise and the lion thing, so they can raise their Brave and HP damage cap, and then like I mentioned before, the lion can dispel all of your buffs with Thunderbolt Plus. So make sure you have some sort of like paralysis character, or you can just try and delay or delete their turns before their gauge is high enough. So with that being said, I'm going to head over to JP and I'm going to show off Comp's force. I will be right back. Okay, so we are back in JP now. So I am in Arc 3, Chapter 1, and this is just the Chaos. I'm doing the Chaos just so like the force gauge is at max so I can show off the skill. So there is something that I want to show off with comp. So first I'm going to use the Kurasame call here. Alright, so now I'm going to go in with the force. So here is Jin Blade. So there's Cypher. And I do have Cloud and Selfie with me for this, so Cloud being here is just to paralyze the boss, and then Selfie for the launches, just so that I'm meeting all the requirements. So the thing about Kam was that there was like news about this bug going around where his force gauge charges up a lot more than it's supposed to, and that's supposed to be from launches. So it's a little weird, and I don't think it was ever fixed in JP. So there was a time when players were just going nuts with like with Kam'lanaut. So I pretty much met all the requirements here, and it goes up by 63%. So you could really take advantage of this if you wanted to. So let's do like his EX right here. So remember, it's 10% at the start, 10% when you're attacking an enemy with like a stun debuff on them, so that makes it 20. Add another 10% when using an ice skill, so that makes it 30. So it going up to like 63% is a lot higher than it should be. And I don't think they're ever gonna fix it in JP. But yeah, that was pretty much all I wanted to show off for this. And so that is going to be it for this video, actually. So thank you guys very much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know if you will be going for Kam's Force and Burst, or if you're going to green Pecil. And I will see you all next time.